Bonjour everyone, I'm Ariel with Urbanist, and today we're going to explore the largest museum in the entire world, the most visited museum in the entire world, holding some of the greatest artworks in human history. However, as much art there is inside, the outside itself is a work of art, and we're going to learn about the building of the Louvre, how the architecture was formed, how it was built in various pieces throughout the eras starting in 1202, and a little bit of architectural secrets that most people don't know about. This is part one of our Louvre broadcast. We're going to go later on tonight inside the museum. But today, right now, let's explore the outside. Let me know where you're watching from. And let me know, have you been to the Louvre before? If so, what was your favorite painting? Hello Rachel, hello Denise, hello Kay, hello Elaine, hello Leanne, Gaetana, welcome everyone, nice to see you here. Glad we have so many people tuning in. Hello Jackie, nice to see you here. Elaine, has to be the Mona Lisa your favorite painting? Amazing. I think I have to put a caveat on that. Aside from the Mona Lisa, what was your favorite painting in the Louvre or artwork? So welcome everyone, I'm Ariel with Urbanist. This is a show where I explore the history, the mysteries, and the secrets of cities all around the world. And today, we're going to walk around one of the most visited museums in the entire world. Millions of people come here on a yearly basis, over 7 million this past year alone. So packed to the brim, especially this summer, that they're not allowing people to buy tickets when you come in. You have to reserve online, and luckily I managed to reserve today at 8 p.m. so I could give you a look inside. But right now, let's look outside, because the Louvre itself is a massive work of art. This is one of the most gorgeous pieces of architecture you will find in the City of Lights in Paris, France. So let's learn about how the Louvre started all the way back in 1202. Yep, the Louvre is that old. Where does the word Louvre come from? Well, we're going to learn about that. Which kings were involved in building the Louvre? Well, we're going to learn about that. Not only learn about it, we're going to see their insignias written all around the building. And then we're going to learn about the crazy antics, the whims of Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who believed himself to be the emperor of Europe. Let's walk around. Let me know where you're watching from, and let me know what's your favorite painting in the Louvre outside of the Mona Lisa. Of course, a lot of people have Mona Lisa as their favorite. All right, let's walk around. Hello, Lorena. Mona Lisa's home. Did you take the metro and go up through the glass structure? Not yet. That will be happening soon. So we're going to go back here. I'm going to talk all about all this area, including the glass pyramid, including the Louvre that most people know about. But in order to start off, let's go around the outside of the Louvre and then wrap back inside this place. And then we're going to go further down, learn about that arc, and go to the Tuileries Gardens. Hello, Michelle. Welcome. Hello, Jackie. How long will I be live? I think about an hour. I hope you're ready. What's your favorite thing so far in the Louvre? You know what? I haven't been to the Louvre in about 6 years, so I'll tell you later tonight as we walk through it. Hello, Tina. Love the people posing on the stone plinths. Yes, a lot of people are doing the pointy thing. You know, they always like just point it. Ah, there we go. Oh, that hurts every time. Hurts every time. So let's walk around, because I think we gotta go chronologically, or at least we'll try our best to do so. Now, if I'm speaking to someone who hasn't been aware of European history, which I know a large portion of my audience does know their European history, But if you don't, what is the Louvre? Well, the Louvre is a massive museum, an art museum. But it doesn't only talk about art, it talks about the history of art. All the way from prehistoric times, from ancient cave paintings found in France and many other places, to our modern day artworks, such as Impressionists and such as works by Monet and Manet, and etc. And also, one of the most prized artworks in the entire world, the Mona Lisa, painted by Leonardo da Vinci. However, the Louvre wasn't always an art museum. It was definitely one of the first major art museums in the world. But the Louvre was before a palace. But before it was a palace, it was a fortress. We're going to learn how it kind of went that trajectory. And the Louvre wasn't built in one single go. It was built from 1200 all the way to the 1790s. And in the middle, 1989. So the Louvre has been in construction ever since. Will it ever finish construction? Probably not. Let's go and walk outside. Bye. Hello, Linda. Not so many selfie sticks in the forest of the gallery, forest inside the galleries. Yes, I think selfie sticks kind of have gone out of style. I see a lot more people with gimbals actually, what I use. So let's get a look at the grand scale of the Louvre from the outside. So the Louvre is right by the River Seine. Why is that? So here we have the Quai François Mitterrand, who was the French Prime Minister, the President of France, who commissioned to build the glass pyramid. We're going to learn a little bit about that later. But here is the huge scale of the Louvre. So here, all the way down right there, go forward, follow this bus, down, 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 for about a quarter mile long. And we can't really see the full end, so we gotta walk a little bit further to see the full end. How long was my plane ride from US to Paris? Only about 6 hours, very quick. All very Da Vinci Code-like. Oh yes. I'll mention the Da Vinci Code as well. Once we get to the glass pyramid. So actually, let me start here by the River Seine. So here is the River Seine, the main artery for Paris. The reason Paris is here ever since Roman times is because of this river. An interesting thing about this river, it doesn't really change in tide all that much, as opposed to rivers like say the Thames, that changes in tide significantly, sometimes every single day. So the River Seine, being such an important waterway, is also very vulnerable to attack. And such attacks started in 1200s, late 1100s, early 1200s, where the Vikings started coming onto the shores of Paris. You can imagine them with boats long, not this long, but pretty long, like this one. And the Vikings started attacking the likes of Ragnar Lothbrok, Rollo, and many others started attacking Paris. And the Parisians were shaking in their boots. They were scared that Paris was going to be overrun like most of England was. So they decided to build a huge wall fortification along the River Seine to protect the main area of medieval Paris. The main fortress that was built to protect Paris was the Louvre. But where does the word Louvre come from? Well, for that, No one really knows. Medieval French was very different from modern day French that we know today. It was more closer to Latin, but even then there was many big differences. One theory, what the Louvre stands for, is that it meant a fortification. It was like an ancient Anglo-Saxon word for fortification. A lot of people say that's not really true. It's not really that accurate. The second theory is that Louvre is a very old Middle Ages French word for red soil. That a lot more people believe, and this area did have some red soil. The third theory, which I actually find pretty amusing, is that Louvre comes from another old French word that stands for a dog training field to chase out wolves. Well, that dog training field to chase out wolves will come into play when we talk about the catacombs. But you pick, you choose. What do you think the Louvre stands for? No one knows for sure, but those are the three main theories. So let's check out the original area where the fort was constructed. Hey Mickey, welcome. Nice to see you here. So cool, I'm in Paris. Yes, I'm loving Paris so far. And wow, that is a big museum. Look, we're continuing. It keeps getting longer and longer and longer. So we're not going to be able to see, at least visibly, the original fortification. But before the French kings of the 1500s decided to take over the Louvre as a palace, the original fortification of the Louvre stood right here. Built by King Auguste, starting in 1202, finished construction probably over 100 years later. Fortifications, as you already know, really never finished construction, but he ended up building a wall that went all along the River Seine. So this gallery that is nearly a quarter-mile long is the same length as the original wall that used to run along the River Seine. So yeah, there is some cover right over here. Hello Cheryl, you're so welcome for sharing. I'm so glad you're tuning in. Hello Mandy, beautiful day. Hello Mabara, looks like great weather. It really is. And hello everyone, welcome. If you're tuning in, spread the word to Facebook groups or to your friends and family on Facebook. The more people we get on these broadcasts, the better. Because Facebook Live is always awesome when we have so many people tuning in. All right. As we're looking at the architecture of the Louvre, how do we know who built what? Well, you don't need to actually consult a book for that. You can actually just look at the walls, because the walls, they built the signs for us. Let me show you. A lot of people don't know this. Let me show you. Let's find it. All right. Over here we have an H. And this is Cor Visconti. Bonjour Dora, welcome, nice to see you here. So you see that little H right here, and they're all around this particular wing. H. And those letters are going to change soon. That H is Henry II, and Henry II was the first one who made the Louvre into his palace. It was a great location for the palace because no longer were they under threat from the Vikings. The Vikings kind of already assimilated to Norman culture in Normandy and Britain and many other parts of the world. of Europe at least, and the first real version of the Louvre that we know about has been built right over here as we look at it. But also the Louvre is covered in these gorgeous, beautiful statues. A lot of it depicting Roman and Greek mythology. The Parisians love their Roman and Greek mythology. Many modern day Western powers are similar. Not so much the British, actually. I think the Parisians love Roman Greek mythology more than we encounter in Britain. And some of them do have funny expressions. I'll show you more as we go inside. Let's walk through. So there's a sign, Museé Lourve, Galeries des Antiques, Gallery of Antiques. And here we're gonna go back inside, right down there. So here is one of the beautiful bridges along the River Seine, one of the bridges that used to be filled with a bunch of lovelocks. They took down the lovelocks because the bridge was near collapse. And here we can see the water splashing on the banks of the Seine. You can imagine the Vikings landing here, confronted with the walls of Paris. That really didn't stop them for many of the battles. Right across the water, we have the École des Beaux-Arts. That is the school of architecture, where a lot of New York City architects learn the Beaux-Arts style that we see all around New York, with places like the Washington Square Park Arc. Also, the building I covered in the past Hidden History episode, the New York Yacht Club, and many, many others. There we have the Ile de Cité, which was where a good portion of the original medieval city was located. Hello Gladys, nice to see you here. Hello Casey, welcome. Bonjour Dora. Bonjour everyone. And when you are in France, you have to say bonjour. It's very key. If you say hello, you'll experience what people say being rude. I say it within air quotes, because if you say bonjour, suddenly it's a very different disposition most people have. You can not know any other French, but the moment you say bonjour, you'll get the best service and treatment and conversations with the French. So here we're going to enter Courtyard. And so many walkers here. It's not the morning. Right now it's 3 p.m., 3:20 something p.m. Paris time. It's only 9 a.m. in New York. Sean, thank you for translating Les Urbanistes des Ossom. Thank you. That is my official house name. The official house name of Urbanists is House des Ossom. Such as the kings of France used to be part of the Bourbon family or the Habsburg family. So here, what letters do you see right up there? So there, up there, we see LL, which is Louis the 13th. So this section over here, right there, was built in 1559. But now we're going to go and enter the extended section when it became a palace of Louis XIV. And here is the Cour Carrée, which means the square courtyard. And it was originally built by Louis XIV to make his grand palace even grander. However, Louis XIV never really settled here. He decided to stay mostly in Versailles. So here we have the conservation wing of the Louvre. And this is interesting because a lot of people assume that the Louvre's paintings kind of stay there for centuries, right? Or for decades. So you see a statue, that statue has been standing there for decades. Not quite the case. Even with paintings or artifacts or trinkets, whatever they have on display, all that is usually moved around and constantly conserved. So they usually do maintenance on it, they might shine it, they might look at the wood of the frames to make sure it's still holding strong, they might re-solidify the foundations of the sculptures. So there's constantly a dance happening around the Louvre during off hours, and during the day it's usually closed. Now it's open 7 days a week, but now it used to be Mondays when it was closed. So right here is the conservation area, which is not part of the museum. It's the area where only people are working, and they have a forger, they have woodworkers, they have carpenters, they have even marble painters, they have people of all sorts and kinds constantly doing work here. Inside the museum, then we're going to learn a little bit how their masterworks come into play to maintain the art. And it is a wind tunnel, yes, so you probably didn't hear me too well. Oh, look at that. Wow. Pure stone. So here we are, Cour Carrée, which is the grand extension made by Louis XIV when he wanted to showcase all the royal items that they own. Look how huge it is. Now, the original plans was to make it into like a normal sized courtyard. Normal sized courtyards, are about half the size. As I've shown you other similar squares, like the one in Madrid, Spain, and the one in Old San Juan, they're about half the size of this. Louis XIV was a man who had a very high view of himself. He called himself the Sun King, the one and only ruler of France. And he decided to show his absolute power by building a courtyard that is immensely huge, twice the size than originally planned. Now, what's really cool are the statues right up here. Look at that. Wow. So here you can stay at the Louvre and just like admire the details for hours. People say that seeing the museum might take a few days, and it probably will, but just being outside will take you at least a few hours to kind of take everything in. Marbara, that was a kind description of him. Indeed it was. Indeed it was. It was a very, very kind description. You know, I'm playing it neutral. Playing it neutral. I'm not taking any sides. So let's see what insignias we can find here. Insignias are everywhere. I'm probably too far away from some of them. All the opulence, all the beauty. Yeah, you're right, Dora. So much opulence. Bonjour, Diane. Welcome. Nice to see you here. Thank you for showing the statue, says Tina. It looks like a party of them. There are so many. You know what? I'm not entirely sure what the statues represent, but if I were to assume, they kind of do look like muses. Muses who inspired the arts or the royal family. If anyone knows more details, let me know. If I appear out of focus, feel free to restart your broadcast, to restart the page. And wait up, I need to adjust my... Ooh. Sorry about that, everyone. I had to adjust my camera. Yeah, so most people always kind of just rush inside the Louvre, but today we're going to take our time to kind of enjoy the Louvre from the outside. So here we found the insignia. Ooh, music. Huh, down there. So right here we have an insignia. We have the L right over here, and above it we have a LA. No, it does not mean Los Angeles. It means King Louis and Anne of Austria. King Louis and Anne of Austria co-built this section over here, and we'll notice as we're going further out that a lot of these sections were they actually included the insignia with either their wives or their mistresses, which is really interesting about French culture. The buildings were carved into the building as well as it was being built. No, statues usually are made separately and then they are placed. I assume also for these top ones over here. Actually, you might be right. These look kind of carved inside. So these look carved inside, but when you see these statues, usually with that beautiful round type of little inside thing, it is placed afterwards. So cobblestones. And Diane, you say tres belle. Yes, tres belle, indeed. Oh, wow. You just gotta keep taking the view in. It's just utterly gorgeous. Wow. So if you're here at the Louvre, take a little bit more time. The museum is huge, so I kind of want to show you overall history. But by all means, if you come here in person, take your sweet time, just embracing every single detail in. So here's Cour Carré. Yeah, weird sound. Sorry everyone. I'm getting a very strange sound from my gimbal. And people have left their markings on here as well. Oh, here we have an Indian name. What type of things are these people selling? They're selling, this guy's selling hats, but usually they're selling the trinkets of the Eiffel Tower. So here, there's always buskers playing right underneath this area. And they're always like, so I think they're being watched by the cops, and they're always rushing to close things up. All right, now let's go back to the main area. So after Henry built this section to expand his palace, Louis XIV built the Courtyard. But between those two guys, a woman was in power for a few years in Paris, in France overall. It was Catherine de Medici, who was originally from Florence. Her husband died due to assassination, and she ended up building the Tuileries Palace, all the way at the opposite end of the Louvre. We're going to visit that section later. The Tuileries Gardens were the gardens and the palace. The gardens were modeled after her home area of Florence, and the palace was separated from the original Louvre Palace. But then came another king, and another king decided, wait a minute, you know, I like this palace, but I also like the Tuileries Palace. Tuileries Palace is no longer there. We'll find out just why. It's a crazy story. Stay tuned for that. He wanted to connect them, so he decided to just replace the wall that used to stand here and build a huge gallery called the Grand Galerie. And the Grand Galerie was a massive 0.25 mile long building. You can say that this is the very first groundscraper. The groundscraper is basically a skyscraper just down. It's massive. Gail, you missed the first part. We'll catch up later. The vendors can be very aggressive. Luckily, they're not aggressive anymore. I think they stopped their practice. Last time I came here 6 years ago, they were really aggressive. I have not encountered that. Maybe because they're assuming I'm French. I don't know. Or they sometimes see me with the camera, so it might turn them away. But I haven't encountered too much aggression, even when I'm not with my camera and just walking around. But then another man came into power, and that was Napoleon Bonaparte. And Napoleon Bonaparte also wanted to increase the size of his grand palace. He chose the Tuileries Palace for his home. And right before he became emperor, he was already starting to fix and groom the palace to become his imperial palace. If anyone was under his wing at that time, they probably already knew, this man attempts to take total control of France and then later Europe. So Napoleon Bonaparte decided to imitate the Grand Galerie, which is actually behind this building, and build it on the opposite side over there. But we have these wings right all around us. And we have a huge N bum, ba-dum, bum. That N, one of the N's represents Napoleon Bonaparte, or also known as Napoleon the First. But while Napoleon Bonaparte is the more famous of the Napoleons, especially conquering all of Europe and becoming basically emperor of Europe for a few years, he had a nephew, Napoleon III, who actually reigned longer than Napoleon Bonaparte did in France. Napoleon III also wanted to expand the Louvre, and he was the final ruler to really take hold of the Louvre and add the finishing touches. So in 1790, as George Eugene Haussmann was tearing down all up the rest of the area of Paris, Napoleon III in the late 1800s decided to build these final two wings right over here that we see in our modern day. The French nobility didn't like Catherine Medici. They referred to her as that shopkeeper's daughter. Small man, big empire syndrome. Oh, we're going to learn a little bit about Napoleon as we're walking through. But just remember this big N. The N is way bigger than any other of the other insignias we've seen so far. Hey Carmen, hola de Orlando, no tenemos buena transmisión. Sorry if it's slow service. It's because I think there's so many people using their phones right here in the Louvre, and also we're encased by these very huge buildings that there is very slow service happening. I'm so sorry about that, but you'll see the replay afterwards. So let's take a closer look at the statues here in this section built by Napoleon III, nephew of Napoleon I. So the statues are a bit different from where you're used to on the other side of the Louvre. On the other side of the Louvre, we saw Greco-Roman style statues. Lots of women in this flowy kind of clothing, men with abs, with spears. But here we have scholars, men of science, men of politics and economics. And it's because Napoleon III was a different kind of ruler. He was really the first Frenchman to start up a constitutional monarchy. He came elected as president originally of the Republic, and in doing so, he wanted to honor the French Revolution and all the scholars and scientists that came out of that revolution. People like Poisson and Lavour, which was a chemist, and many, many others. Natalia, hello from Argentina. Welcome. Nice to see you here. Jackie, great weather. Just checked. It's about 75 degrees and low humidity. It really is. It's excellent weather here in Paris at this time of year. You don't need a jacket and you're not sweating that much. So the final edition of the Louvre was built in 1989, fully finished construction in 1993. And this huge glass pyramid right in the middle. Francois Matinard, and sorry, please forgive my French pronunciation. I haven't had enough time to practice every single name. but feel free to correct me. Francois Montinard decided to go up to Ian Pei and ask him if he could build a new grand entrance to the Louvre. Who is Ian Pei? Well, Ian Pei is one of the most famous architects in American history. He's a Chinese American, grew up in America, and built some of the most famous brutalist buildings that we know of today, including the Silver Towers, which I recently covered in one of my most unique buildings of New York City. Ian Pei recently died just a few months ago at the age of about 101. And he told Francois Montinard, the president, I can only build the grand entrance under one condition. The Francois Montinard said, yeah, sure. Well, what's the condition? If we build the grand entrance right in the middle of Cour Napoleon. Cour Napoleon is this courtyard right over here. And this was a radical move because what Francis Montinard and anyone who was involved in restoring the Louvre and building a much larger entrance thought of building something kind of either right here and kind of doing something that would change the facade in this building, or building something a little bit further down. But Ian Pei, being an architect who greatly respects the work of the previous architects who built the Louvre, decided to not do anything that would ruin the look of the Louvre. If you built a building down there, it would block the view down here. If you built a grand entrance here, you would destroy the original artwork here. So Ian Pei decided to do something radical. Built the grand entrance underground. About 9 meters underground from our feet right now. And he built this glass pyramid. But why a glass pyramid? Hello, Natalia, desde Argentina. Heather, there's always slow service in Europe. I've gotten lucky so far, but here in the Louvre, I think there's just so many people, and it's a very densely packed area, and also very huge buildings that don't allow for the service to bounce around a lot. I think that's an issue. It must take a lot of upkeep to keep those statues looking good. It really does. Heather, oh my god, 75 degrees, can't believe you're here. I like the contrast of Ian Pei's work and the older part of the museum. I do too. Diane thinks it looks out of place. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. What do you think of Ian Pei's glass pyramid? If you're a fan of the film Da Vinci Code, well, you know this was featured in the film Da Vinci Code because it's aligned right in the middle of the Roslin line, which is one of the main ley lines that runs through Europe. A ley line is a center of energy along the Earth. It aligns with a lot of different beliefs of how the energy in the Earth moves around. And in Da Vinci Code, there was a theory that actually was true in the movie, in the fictional context, where the main character played by Tom Hanks goes up here and finds out that this is directly aligned with a church that had the buried dead body of Mary Magdalene, if I remember correctly. But why did Ian Pei choose a pyramid? Well, pyramid for a few reasons. When Napoleon I decided to invade Egypt, yes he did, and decided to invade Egypt. I actually talked about it in my second episode of Hidden History. He went all the way to do battle in the pyramids. And aside from bringing a massive cavalry unit headed by Alexander Dumas, the general, and a huge amount of soldiers, he also brought a massive team of scholars. People who started studying everything that they could about Egyptian culture. But not only studying, but also stealing a lot of the artworks from Egypt and bringing them back here to France, and then later proliferating all throughout Europe and into America. That Egyptomania stuck with the French for the longest time, and there's a lot of Egyptian imagery all around Paris, which I'll point out as we keep walking along. So Ayunpe first wanted to honor that, but also wanted to honor Egyptian architecture as kind of being the primordial architecture of the modern world. It's the pyramids that were looked in awe by any architect in the European world ever since antiquity. However, this pyramid is not completely covered up in stone as the pyramids in Egypt. So there was a whole lot of controversy with Ayunpe's work. A lot of people thought that this glass pyramid was way out of place. It was a complete insult to the original architecture of the Louvre. However, Ayunpe said that this glass pyramid was made out of glass for one very specific reason. The original pyramids in Egypt are built as places for the dead. That's why they're covered up in stone, to give a final resting place in the middle of the darkness of the stone enclosures of the pyramid. But here, Ayunpe wanted to make it see-through, kind of the inverse of what happens in the pyramids of Egypt. As a place for the dead, this is a place for the living. The place for the living to take part in the history of art that's still growing, still thriving, still maturing. There we have the modern glass pyramid by Ayunpe. Let's check it out through here. Debbie, he also left with many Egyptian treasures. He did, yes, as I mentioned, both studying and stealing. We'll get into what other things Napoleon Bonaparte stole a little bit as we walk towards the Arc. So 9 meters down is the museum. So let's see if we can get perspective of the pyramid this way. George, sure, let me know what you think. You say my coined expression is particularly true here. You can't mix styles. George, I fully understand. However, the Louvre itself is also a mixed style. It's a mixed style from all classical architecture. Kind of like a pre-version of Beaux-Arts style. Especially since it was constructed from the 1500s all the way to the late 1800s. Helen, you love the fountain. Me too. The fountain actually does some awesome things. I think later at night it goes way higher. So happy so many people are tuning in. If you're just tuning in, I'm Ariel with Urbanists. Let me know where you are watching from. All right, let's go to the Arc. The first Arc built by Emperor Napoleon I. George, you argue that the subtle styles blend. Yeah, you're right. There is a blend in these older styles. But here, I really do love the triangle. My personal opinion, I know people won't share this opinion. I do love the blend of old with the new. I think it adds a nice modern touch to a very classical building. Hey Regor, welcome. Nice to see you here. Let's look down here. You can see the lines are getting huge. These are the lines to go in to see the Mona Lisa. Just to enter the wing, and then you have to make another line to see the Mona Lisa. Hopefully I'll be able to show you the Mona Lisa for at least 30 seconds, and then I'll continue with the story as we're walking around the Louvre later tonight. There are a few places, there are a few cafes, which is so cool. There's a cafe here, and there's a cafe right up there, and there's also a cafe right over here, Cafe Marley. Yeah, my perspective is I love the blend of the old with the new. After studying a bunch of history, it starts becoming very apparent that nothing is old and nothing is new. It all starts blending together with time. You give enough time to this glass pyramid, maybe 200 years, maybe even less, 100 years, it starts looking all the same. And you see that with architecture all around Europe. You see that with architecture in New York City. It starts kind of making a universal aesthetic that's very unique to the city itself. Okay, let's walk through here. Heather, yes, the line is super long. You have to line up outside, but you cannot buy tickets at the door anymore. In August, at least, at this time of year. You have to reserve tickets online in advance. Today, the only tickets I was able to get using my museum pass and going online to get them was at 8 p.m., which is only an hour and 45 minutes before it closes. I'll show you a secret entrance. It's not fully secret, but it's an entrance a lot of people don't know about. That's a shortcut to get into the museum and avoid the very long security lines. The pyramid was extremely controversial when it was built, but many Parisians loved it because of the mix of styles. And it's an entry that leads down into a very efficient way of getting into the Louvre. Yeah, that's another thing I really like about Ian Pei's work. He's not only an architect that's very daring in his aesthetics. His aesthetics kind of allow his architecture to kind of blend in with the overall city. But also, he's a very practical thinker. He also has a very strong engineering mind. And he was able to build an entrance that ended up being really efficient with giving people an entrance into the Louvre without crowding the very front door, as you see in modern day museums like the Met in New York City. Jane, 2:30 p.m. 2:30 p.m. New York City time, 8:30 p.m. Paris time. Give me about 10 to 20 minutes, give or take 10 to 20 minutes, because I'm not sure how packed the Mona Lisa is going to be at that time. I'm hoping that it won't be so crowded. So the Louvre just keeps on going and going and going and going and going. And now we're close to reaching the end of the Louvre. But here we have the Arc for Napoleon I. So Napoleon I fancied himself the Emperor of Europe. But who was Napoleon Bonaparte? What is the name Bonaparte? Doesn't sound very French to me. Sounds like Italian, vaguely Italian. Well, it's because Napoleon Bonaparte, when he first came and studied at the École Militaire, which I covered yesterday at the end of my Eiffel Tower broadcast, he didn't know any French. Came to Paris, didn't know any French. So what language did he speak? It wasn't Italian. He spoke Corsican. He was from the island of Corsica. Corsica was a part of France. It still is to this day. Though that might change in the very near future. There's plans to give Corsica full independence. But Corsica is a very different culture to France. Also a very different language and very different accent. So Napoleon Bonaparte, while he was training in the military academy, didn't know any French. And he didn't know how to make friends, and he was a loner. And he dedicated all his time to studying every single type of military strategy he could. So much so that by the age of 30, Napoleon Bonaparte was emperor of Europe. Well, at least emperor of France, and then a few years later, emperor of Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte decided to crown himself, because only he was in charge of his own fate. It was very unprecedented for a new royalty to crown himself. Poor Corsican boy coming to Paris, not knowing any French, and by the age of 30, ends up being the ruler of the most powerful country in all of Europe. That's a crazy story. And because of that crazy story, Napoleon Bonaparte wanted to juice every single ounce of that story and build monuments in his own honor. He chose the Tuileries Palace as his main imperial palace, but he also wanted to build a huge monument in honor of his first few battles that he won in Italy. Right here is that first arc. Before there was an Arc de Triomphe, this was the very first arc that Napoleon first built in his own honor. However, Napoleon I, I mentioned, went over to Europe to steal a bunch of artifacts. He didn't stop in Egypt to steal artifacts. He continued to steal artifacts from all around Europe, including Venice, where he stole this horse. El museo más hermoso en el mundo. Sí, Julio, es tan hermoso el Louvre. Aquí está el arco, no es de triunfo, este es el arco primero de Napoleón. This is not the Arc of Triumph. This is the first arc that Napoleon built. We're going to see a little bit of the Arc de Triomphe as we walk towards the gardens. And Jackie, I hope for my sake, your sarcastic comment about being packed turns out to be incorrect. I hope so too. That's why I decided to go at night. First, because I know it's a better time for many of you to tune in. But second, I heard that it's a lot less packed with people towards the night. Because just people don't tend to go to the museum at night, despite it being free. So this series of horses embroiled in gold, this is a replica. It's a replica because later on, about 150 years later, they gave the original back to the Venetians. Because most of Europe was really pissed off that Napoleon and a bunch of other French monarchs, even Napoleon III, stole a bunch of artwork from all around Europe, and also Egypt. And also all around the world, because the French started expanding their colonies, especially during Napoleon III's rule. So they gave back the original to the Venetians, and this is a replica. But Napoleon I, that man had a very large ego, very, very large ego. Probably the largest ego of any person I've studied in history thus far. We'll see if someone tops him as we continue learning about history all around the world. So he depicted his grand victory over here. This victory, he was only a mere, as I mentioned, only a mere 30 years old, which is very young for a self-made ruler of a country. To put into context, George Washington, I think, was in his early 50s when he took control of the U.S., became the first president. Most U.S. presidents tend to be around 40-something years old. Most presidents of France, same thing, either late 40s all the way to their 60s. Tina, you're a brilliant storyteller. Bonaparte will never be the same again. Didn't know any of that. Oh, I'm so happy I'm able to tell an interesting story. Just look at this. This ain't no Washington Square Park arc. Though I really do love the arc, they did not go as ostentatious as this one. Pure stone. like Napoleon's heart. I'm just joking. Though that joke might be more relevant when we talk about General Alexander Dumas, but that'll happen soon when I go to his statue. Stay tuned next week. Perhaps a current American political leader has a bigger ego. Well, you know, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of competition. I'll just say that. There's a lot of sand here because of all the... Dora, are you referring to Central Park in New York City, or are you referring to Central Park in, I think, in Madrid? Let me know. The Arc also is very similar to Stanford White from New York City, who studied the School of Architecture, Beaux-Arts, that was innovated here by architects who preceded him. He copied this arc, also the Arc de Triomphe, which we're going to learn about soon. However, there's a secret entrance, or not secret entrance, but entrance that a lot of people don't know about. An entrance that is technically only for groups, but you can come in here and they won't really tell you anything. I'm gonna try out later, I'll confirm. But what I heard from many people is that you can walk right through here and avoid the very long lines that are right in the center of the pyramid. So if you're coming to the Louvre, come right here to Le Carrousel de Louvre Entrance, and this is your fast entrance to go through here. Oh, Mabara. Oh yeah, it's a fascinating story. I can't wait to tell all of you. Dumas, who wrote The Count of Monte Cristo, was the son of General Alexander Dumas. And it's a very epic story because Alexander Dumas, the writer, also has a son called Alexander Dumas. So it's 3 Alexanders. Let me show you a little bit of these gardens, and then let's walk towards the original garden, the Tuileries Gardens. And the original bronze horses are now on San Marco, Venice. Yes, as I mentioned, they were taken from this arc near the Louvre. You can see the Arc de Triomphe. We're going to see the Arc de Triomphe soon. And oh, I forgot to mention one thing. So thank you for reminding me. So there's some modern sculptures here as well, which is cool. Jenny, of course, thank you for the extra information. There's very interesting birds here. I don't know what their names are yet, but these birds, I see them all through Paris. I'm so happy you're enjoying the tour. Sharon, thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, the replay will be available. If it doesn't upload in HD quality, I'll re-upload to HD later on. So stay tuned for that. All right, let me circle back around here. It's a little bit of a maze. Ginny, personally, you love the pyramid, but I've never seen the Mona Lisa. Oh, you're going to see the Mona Lisa tonight. Crossing fingers, you're going to see the Mona Lisa tonight. And Tina, you got lost when you got inside. Yes, I'm prepared. I'm prepared. I know all too well. It's coffee time. I'll have one. Yes, I'll have a coffee as well soon. And the birds crows. I'm not entirely sure. And the seated woman in bronze is by Maliol. Ooh, thank you for letting us know, George. This is why I love, as I mention all the time, this is why I love live video. It's because live video truly is a community where we can all kind of enjoy this experience together. So, you might be wondering, Paris has a bunch of grand boulevards. These grand boulevards were made by George Eugene Haussmann, under the commission of Napoleon III, first president of France, but then monarch, and then eventually constitutional monarch that was ousted again. However, the Louvre predates the original grid system, diagonal grid system that George Eugene Haussmann built. And while the Louvre is closely aligned with the Arc de Triomphe, it's not fully aligned with the Arc de Triomphe and the Champs-Élysées. However, there is one indicator of how it is aligned. Right over here is the statue of Louis XIV. His horse's hooves are raised up high. If you know what that means, let me know in the comments. And that statue is directly aligned with the Champs-Élysées and the Arc de Triomphe. We're going to visit those probably tomorrow. I'll confirm later tonight. But that is where it's directly aligned. But the Louvre itself, the glass pyramid, slightly a few degrees off to the side. Okay, so let's find our final stop. And this is where the story that I started talking about yesterday and just mentioned right now, George Eugene Haussmann. He completely redefined the city. However, by redefining the city, hundreds of thousands of people were displaced. Most of them the lowest classes in Paris. People who, because they were displaced, couldn't afford to move into a new place, and to move further and further out of the city. And the city of Paris, excuse me, there's a lot of sand. I ingested a little bit of sand. Also getting emotional because of the story. The city of Paris grew twice in size. So any lower class people had to actually move even further out of the city. So what happened? Well, George Eugene Haussmann ended up rebuilding Paris. But he didn't stay in power for much longer than that, because his boss, Napoleon III, was ousted, and he was captured by Otto von Bismarck, the ruler of the first German state. First it was Prussia, but then they made our modern conception of Germany. And because the Prussians/Germans end up winning that battle and capturing Napoleon III, the Prussians were right here in Paris, surrounding the entire city. People said that they were even swimming in the fountains of the Tuileries Gardens. This pissed off the poor Frenchmen, but there was one thing that pissed them off even more. The Frenchmen were required to release their arms. Now, France has a huge, long history of French revolutions by this point in the late 1800s. So, what happens when you tell the poor Frenchmen, lower classes, that had to move into the very far outskirts of the city, that they had to release their arms while they were already impoverished and already pissed off and already being invaded by a foreign army? Well, they didn't like that at all. So they rebelled. But this rebellion wasn't an ideological rebellion. This rebellion wasn't headed by a single ruler or leader. No, this rebellion was pure madness and chaos. And this ended up being called the Paris Commune. The Commune because the people who rebelled lived in the communes outside of Paris. And they took their guns and their cannons, set them up in Montmartre, and fired it on the city itself. First the Prussians, and then they decided to leave. And then their very own Frenchmen. What ensued was chaos. And I mentioned there used to be a very beautiful palace right over here. The Tuileries Palace that was at the very end with the gardens right in front. Well, the gardens are still here. But as we shift the perspective just slightly, there's no more palace. We can see all the way to the obelisk that was brought over from Egypt, and beyond that, the Arc de Triomphe along the Champs-Élysées. So Heather forced to release their arms, you say. Well, yeah, indeed, and that conversation still goes on in many other parts of the world. But let's stick to history. What happened? Well, the full detail of this chaotic uprising, I'm going to continue it in my Montmartre episode. Stay tuned next week for that, because there's a whole lot more to this story. But to make a longer story short for this particular broadcast, the palace, in the fury, the aimless madness fury of the Paris Commune, they end up burning the Tuileries Palace. But by pure luck, and maybe by the engineering quality of the Louvre that was attached to the Tuileries Palace was completely unscathed. So that's why we no longer see the grand imperial palace built by Catherine de Medici and then later housing Napoleon I. It was because of a pure, bloody, aimless war in the middle streets of Paris, the worst revolution to have ever taken place in this city. One of the worst battles that France ever endured, probably outside of World War II. Way bloodier than any of the previous revolutions. For that story, we'll continue next week in Montmartre. Hello, Naomi, Ginny, good point. Though, of course, I don't discuss modern day politics. But, you can learn a lot from history. That's the beauty about history. Hello, Olive, welcome. I found those birds in Germany. Yes, I found those birds in Germany. I haven't been to Germany yet, but that's interesting that they're also in Germany. So let me know, what birds are those? If anyone's very good in determining what birds are. Louis XIV died of gangrene. He was very ill and died in bed at Versailles on 1st of September 1715. Ooh, thank you for clarifying. 77th birthday. Yes, and Louis XIV was the longest reigning ruler of French history. Longer, of course, than Napoleon. Longer, of course, than Napoleon III. And Brethier is a common name in France, but there was a General Brethier, and that's why you see the name around Paris. So thank you for clarifying the name that we saw a few times. So right over there we see the Eiffel Tower. Hurts every time. And then we see the Museé Lourve, Versailles, which was a train station built by Napoleon III and converted later on into its own beautiful museum. I'll show it next week, a little bit later. But here's the Tuileries Gardens. Germany's only a 4-hour drive away. Wow, Germany's so close. That's crazy to think about. Sometimes Germany seems like a different world from Paris or from... So that brings the end to my stories for today. I hope you enjoyed all the stories I presented to you of the Louvre and its surrounding areas. Let's spend about 10 minutes to just meander through the gardens. A lot of these statues are not what were originally here when the gardens were built. When the gardens were built and then later further developed by Napoleon I, they had these older Greco-Roman style statues, but a lot of them were taken away, put inside the Louvre, and outside they put more of these modern statues in the 1900s. So what we're gonna see is a lot more modern statues like this man. Yeah, this is very modern. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that pose. Dad bod and everything. Very modern. Or modern. So I hope you enjoyed these stories. Let me know if you have any last remaining questions for these last 10 minutes as we stroll around the gardens. If you want a great place to sit, this is probably one of the most famous places to sit in Paris. Among the most famous places to sit in Paris. Very comfy seating too. They're very good at making public seating. And if you asked any questions previously that I did not answer, that I unfortunately did not see, feel free to ask them again. And yes, that man definitely had a dad bod. If you don't know the concept of the dad bod, it's more of a thing that's really discussed in America. It's basically the type of body that a lot of dads have, fathers. Just kind of like overall, not obese, but kind of a little bit overweight. Just for a little bit of clarification on the history of the dad bod. But look at these gardens. Tina, you love my stories. They were so good. I stayed up past midnight in Melbourne. Oh, cool. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. You know what? I'm going to visit soon. I have a friend also from Melbourne who told me of a little Parisian bakery that's owned by two Melbournians. I'm not sure how you properly say someone from Melbourne or Australians. And I'm going to visit. Apparently they do amazing tiramisu. I am 6 hours later than New York. That's why right now it's afternoon in Paris and it's morning in New York City. Dora, a beautiful tour. I'm amazed by the grand size of the museum. What did you eat for dinner last night? Oh, Debbie, yes, thank you for asking it again. I didn't end up going for dinner. Did I? No, I before the broadcast of Museé, I ate a great crepe, which I'm going to post a photo soon as a recommendation. And then I just ate like a few stuff at the Asian restaurant. It was like an Asian eatery. It wasn't too good. But I found a great breakfast. Go to my Insta stories. I'm doing some kind of quick restaurant and food recommendations. Whatever I find, go to my Insta stories. I have a great breakfast recommendation. I ate a very great breakfast today. If you want to check that out. And yes, there's chairs all around. So a lot of the concept that we see in New York City of these chairs that you move around come specifically from Paris. Bryant Park in New York City was the first park that was inspired by this Parisian style of park, allowing people to move the chairs any way they please. But they also have these kind of lounging chairs, which make it all the better. We'll look forward to visit the tiramisu. Yes, I'll try to show it either by photo or maybe a mini video. Probably via photo, so stay tuned. Beautiful gardens. Hear those birds, which sound like crows. They don't look like the crows I see in the US though. Crepes are life, says Heather. Jackie, I love how you can remember all the historical facts, but stumbled a bit on whether you had dinner. So some things are more important than others. Sometimes I remember the food if I'm really impressed, but if I'm not impressed by the food, I usually don't remember it at all. So I am still developing my kind of navigation of food in the city. But just FYI, if you are from New York City or from LA or from any other major American city, especially LA, New York City, or San Francisco or Chicago, it might be a little bit daunting, or from London, it might be a little bit daunting to come to a city like Paris, because food culture is different. There is definitely a huge respect for food culture, unlike maybe other cities in Europe where food culture is not so important. But there's a huge respect for food culture, but you really don't easily find food, at least good hearty food that you're used to in America, and especially quick. Being a New Yorker, I have a hesitation of going to restaurants and sit down for a long time. I know that's the Parisian lifestyle, but I'm still in that American mentality, especially with doing these videos. I kind of just want to eat and go. So it's a very different food culture. So if you're coming here, be prepared for that. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that as I walk around later. Hey, I'll keep telling you that as I walk around a little bit later, probably next week. I'll expound on that as I show you inside look into like a brasserie or a bistro. Helene, have I been to Notre Dame yet? I walked around last night. It's very closed off. They're doing heavy repairs, but I will be doing a broadcast from the outside about the history of Notre Dame. It's very fascinating. That'll be next week as well, later next week. Try to find the local in the Tuileries. Get out of the touristy areas if you want to eat well. Ginny, great recommendation. Thank you. It's true, I can remember the days where I was up each day in Maine by my memory of where I had lobster. Indeed, yeah. Oh, I was very impressed by Maine's lobster. I found like one lobster roll place, which was very, very interesting to see in Paris. Like a Maine lobster roll place. It was such a, what people call cognitive dissonance. Just felt so out of place. However, one pro tip, I know this is going to make a lot of Parisians gasp in horror, but if you really want a hearty meal, try eating a particular dish that a lot of Parisians, I think, secretly love. And they secretly love because I see them all around the place, and I see them really munching on these things. But if you ask them, they probably won't say that they enjoy it. I don't know, you let me know if you're Parisian. You can have a good juicy hamburger. There's a whole lot of places that do great hamburgers, and also do hamburgers with like some great French cheeses. Also, the French already do great fries. They're not called French fries here, but they do great fries already. So if you're looking for a quick bite, try a good French hamburger. When are you heading to Place Verdun and the Ritz Hotel? Well, the Ritz, I can't go inside. I tried going inside yesterday. Try to see if I can shoot some video. But no, there's not much to show from the outside. I might not do the Ritz, but Place Vendôme, I gotta check that out. Is that the plaza where the Ritz is located? And Debbie, you love the lobster roll tour. And will I go to the cemetery? Yes. That'll probably be the week after next week. Probably next weekend. So stay tuned for that. Alright, so I think we reached the end. Let me show you a few of the statues on the other side. However, one thing I end up doing recently is today I bought myself a museum pass. Hence, that's why I'm using going to the Louvre later tonight. Museum pass is a great deal because you get for only €72, 6 days, you get unlimited entrance to any of the museums. The majority of the museums, like almost all of them. That's really awesome because that ends up saving you a whole lot of money because each of the museums are around €12 each. The smaller museums you might not go, so if you're a person who doesn't like museums that probably will only go to the Louvre or maybe only the Louvre and Versailles, then don't bother. If you're a person who kind of just wants the freedom to stroll into any museum, get yourself the museum pass. It's a great deal. I got myself a museum pass for 6 days, 72 or 77? 77 euro. I'll confirm in the comments. 77 euro. And that's why all these days I'm going to do stuff that's around the museums or inside the museums. So stay tuned for these next 6 days, including the Palace of Versailles on Tuesday. All right, everyone. Let me show you a few of the statues, and then we're going to finish. Ginny, you say, oh no, please, no, don't eat hamburgers. You can find good plats du jours. Yeah, that's an interesting thing I'm trying to get used to, because as an American, I am usually hungry for dinner around 5 p.m. It's just the normal time people eat in America. And also I encountered that the same thing in London when I visited there for a month. But here you can't really get yourself a plat du jour between the hours of 12 to 7:30, which is a pretty wide gap. If you do go for a plat du jour at one of those service continuar places that are just continuous service, you usually don't end up being so good. So that's the thing where it takes a little bit getting used to. Plat du jour means the plate of the day, the dish of the day. So yeah, I know for Parisians this is very absurd talk, but that's the beauty about travel. You know, you have to kind of learn the ropes of each of the food culture. Because food is a very crucial part to the experience. I know if you're American traveling to other American cities, you don't really think about it, because you're obviously going to go to the places that are already good to eat or easy to eat. But if you're going to a different country, like Paris, like Madrid, like Spain, like Italy, you have to get used to their own culture. Or like if you were to go to Japan or China, it's a very different culture in each of these countries. And I think that's part of the aspect of the beauty of travel. It's kind of getting used to a different lifestyle. Because by getting used to the schedule of the food, you end up getting used to the lifestyle of the people. By me trying to kind of adjust myself to the Parisian schedule of food, I'm adopting kind of that more Parisian lifestyle where I take that big chunk of the day from 12:30 all the way to 7:30 as time to kind of just explore. It's time to kind of just really be outside. And later, that's when I sit down and relax. I hope that makes sense for anyone tuning in, especially if you're from other countries, because even in other countries it's different. I've been already to 10 different cities on Urbanist. 4 of them have been European, and each of them have had a different food culture. Your tour shows the surrounding that are not shown as we have partial views. You see the Louvre, but not the surroundings in other videos. Oh, Irene, I'm so glad I'm able to show a little bit more. Yes, this is like a live video. I take a little bit more time to show you everything. Coco Chanel's. Ooh, yeah, I might actually go to Coco Chanel's house. Stay tuned. I really want to talk about her history. And I see Ferris Wheel. Yes, there's a huge Ferris Wheel there. I think that one's permanent, but they have a huge fair here. I think it goes on through the summer. It's really awesome if you're coming here with kids. It's a great place to come with kids. Might be pretty expensive though, but I assume it's a great place to come nonetheless. You know what? Let's finish at the pyramid. Might as well. We're already here. We already walked all this way. Might as well continue all the way to the Champs-Élysées. No, I'm just joking. That's all right. That's about a 40-minute walk. It looks short, but it's a 40-minute walk. We're going to finish at the obelisk that was borrowed from the Egyptians. Debbie, you love the concept of food connecting with the culture. Yeah, it really does. I know when I went to Helsinki, for example, Helsinki, the capital of Finland, they have free refills of coffee in all their coffee shops, all their cafes, like American diners, but the coffee was really good. And by getting used to that type of unlimited access to coffee, it made me super alert to just go anywhere. So much so that I wasn't even thinking about food. I was just like, go. Even though Helsinki is a very slow city. And here is the wide open space, which you don't really see in New York City. Paris is really unique as opposed to New York City, as opposed to Helsinki, as opposed to London, also as opposed to Madrid. You don't really have this wide open space. All the little tuk-tuk drivers are here as well. Look at these lamps. Wow. So tune in later today at around 8:30 p.m. Paris time, 2:30 p.m. New York City time, for an inside look into the Louvre Museum. And then tune in every single day at 9 a.m. New York City time, 3 p.m. Paris time, all the way until the 25th of August. There's a little bit more than a week of full live videos, historical tours every single day. If you want to become a supporter, think of it as giving me a tip for these videos. It leads to contributing to giving you live videos that where I have to have access to data, also having good shoes as well. If you want to become a supporter for $5 a month, you can do so by clicking that button right down there. Boop. Click it right there. There we go. Okay. Actually, I don't know if that's the exact spot. Let me know. Thank you so much for tuning in. What kind of shoes do I wear? I wear Converses, but I have a little secret. Converses blend in with the European atmosphere. It's very Parisian to wear Converses as opposed to typical American sneakers, white American sneakers. However, I use foot pads inside, and those foot pads make it great for walking shoes. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep being awesome, and always keep on exploring. Au revoir, everyone. Bye-bye.